Help us, Intel, you're our only hope. Or that was the plea from PC Gamer. And just really looking into, okay, Intel, are you gonna come in and save the day? Because the GPU market is absolutely horrible. We need somebody to save the day. And Raja Kaduri, who's heading up Intel's Arc GPU program, responded with, I am with you, PC Gamer. This is a huge issue for PC gamers and the industry at large. Intel Graphics is working hard to find a path toward the mission, getting millions of Arc GPUs into the hands of PC gamers every year. And that's kind of a non-answer. So what I want to look at in this video is, first of all, what are these Arc GPUs? What should we expect from them? And what impact do I think that they're going to have on the overall GPU market? Is this going to save the day, or are we all still doomed? Well, let's dig in. So what should we actually expect from the Intel GPUs? Well, we don't have actual real official information, but there have been a ton of leaks. And this is a pretty decent summary of them that I found right here. By the way, I will link all of my sources in the description of this video, as I usually do. Now, what we're expecting here is a mixture of desktop chips and laptop chips. And this is kind of from WCCF Tech here, if I didn't already say that. That's where this is from. And we expect there to be a top-end model that is 512 execution units. That's what Intel names their little, bundle of all the processing stuff on their chip, right? Which expands out to all of this other stats. But here's what I'm getting at, is we should see the full version with 512 execution units, a cut down version with 384 execution units, that's 75% of the big one. And then we should also see a 256 execution unit chip that is half of the 512 execution unit, right? And then we should also see a 128 execution unit chip. All of these coming in at different power levels and with different amounts of VRAM and all of that. But what does this actually mean? Well, let's jump over to a relative performance chart here from Tech Power Up. Now, I love this one. I think it's one of the best relative performance charts for all GPUs that you can conveniently use on the internet. And why do I have a 3070 Ti pulled up here? Well, according to the best leaks we have so far, now some of these have been from places like Moore's Law is Dead, coming in for months and months and months now, which all along have said that they're targeting between a 3070 and 3070 Ti type performance for Intel's top-end Arc chip. But we've even seen some leaked benchmarks that I reported on a few videos ago, actually showing that in terms of certain floating point operations and certain benchmarks, the Arc 512 execution unit chip did seem to be performing somewhere in the ballpark of a 3070 and 3070 Ti. Now, that's not a flat-out gaming benchmark, so we can only read so much into that. But basically, all signs point to this being the performance target for their top end. So if we assume that, then what will their whole product stack give us? It's looking like, again, the 384 execution units being at about 75% of their top end chip would make it fall somewhere here, around between a 3060 and a 3060 Ti. Probably something along the lines of a 6600 XT. That would put it, if we go to older chipsets, somewhere around here like an RTX 2080, that type of a thing. So expect this ballpark. Now again, these are very rough estimates based on the information that we have to go off of so far. Then it wouldn't be surprising to see their 256 execution units model, which is, again, half of the execution units of their top-end chip, which would put it at something like 50% of its performance. Now, before you jump in on the comment section, I understand this is really, really ballpark stuff. If they took that lower-end chip and were somehow able to clock it higher, do other things to it, it doesn't mean it's going to be exactly 50% of the performance of the top-end chip just because it has half of those execution units. But it's the ballpark, guys. I'm just going ballparks here. So that would put it somewhere along the lines of like a RTX 2060-ish type of performance. That's probably going to be worse than a 3060, but wouldn't surprise me if it's better than the 3050, right? So kind of in there. Maybe it's our 3050 Ti, which is honestly kind of how I think about the performance of the 2060 anyway. And then if we go down to their 128 execution unit model, again, being 25% of the chips, 1/4 of the execution units, it wouldn't surprise me if we were down here in this performance tier, which would put it around a GTX 1650. And by the way, there have been a number of leaks pointing towards a performance target for the 128 execution unit model as being between a 1650 and a 1650 Super, which admittedly actually is a pretty big range. Your GTX 1060 kind of falls into that range. So again, these are pretty ballpark figures, but as I scrolled through this list, you kind of saw the product stack that we're going. Now, if it was really down as low as a 1650, I mean, that's not a super powerful GPU, but if the price was right, and the availability was good, that could surely be interesting. So what does this all mean? What actually could we expect on these prices? Well, here's one problem. No matter what the MSRPs are, we know that the market currently doesn't really want to obey MSRPs. And I've seen headlines that are then quoting someone from Intel saying that as far as like software lockouts and things of that nature, we're not designing this product or building any features at this point that specifically target miners. In general, all signs point to there won't be any hash rate limiters on these things like NVIDIA is doing. Now, we don't know if these will be good mining cards, so that's a big question mark. Also, even NVIDIA's light hash rate stuff is really only targeting Ethereum. And that's the other big elephant in the room here, which is that although Ethereum keeps being rumored as, or announced as switching to proof of stake, which if you're not in on it basically means right now the cryptocurrency that is mostly mined on GPUs as the most profitable GPU mined currency is Ethereum. It will switch over to proof of stake, where GPUs are no longer used to mine it. That's what you need to know for this video. We're not going to go into more detail on that. The basic thing meaning that GPUs would no longer be used to mine Ethereum, and that should happen in June. However, we have to acknowledge that the release date for that proof of stake transition has been continually pushed back for many months, if not years at this point. So will it really happen? I don't know. But a lot of the back-end transitions and testing for it to happen actually have happened now. So it looks like this might be a more realistic switchover than we've seen in the past. Anyway, so I've got to say that without the limiters there, this is a big question mark. However, the other issue is just the supply. Is supply going to be getting better, and will Intel be able to secure a lot of supply? Well, I actually think that it'd be realistic to assume that Intel could. Intel has a lot of money. They do have tons of money, and these will be produced by TSMC. These at least this first generation of Intel Arc GPUs are not going to be produced on Intel's own foundries. They will be buying from TSMC along with lots of other customers, but dollars are everything there. So if Intel's willing to put in a huge amount of money into this, I think it is possible that they could secure themselves a large amount of supply. And, we do have the quote here, which, like I said, doesn't really tell us a whole lot, saying that they at least are working towards the mission of getting millions of Arc GPUs into the hands of PC gamers every year. But this is where we really need to delve into this a bit more, because remember how I said that these are targeting both laptops and desktops. So we still have the Q1 2022 target for these Arc GPUs, but we really haven't seen a whole lot of information about them actually coming from Intel. I think a lot of us, myself included, thought we'd see more at CES, and we didn't. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if the initial wave of Arc GPUs is laptops. Intel has big business in laptops, and they already have a lot of OEM partners that make laptops, and I would very much expect the first big wave of them to-be laptops. We'll see Intel laptops where they have an Intel CPU and GPU, and that being their first wave. Again, I don't know for sure, but there's a lot of signs pointing to that being likely. And also, even when we start seeing the desktop GPUs, I would very much not be surprised if we also, again, saw a huge amount of that supply going into pre-built systems, OEM systems, with the Intel's partners that they've already established in that. Now, there's some pros and cons to this. The con being, if you're just trying to buy a GPU and Intel's not releasing those for you, well, I mean, that didn't really do anything to help you, did it? But, I mean, from Intel's perspective, I mean, for one thing, like, you know, if they can sell those, great, and they've got those partners and all that, great. Also, if they don't want to be seen as the bad guy, here's the thing. Like, if Intel wants to set a certain MSRP, the market doesn't have to obey that MSRP, right? So it's easier to control the pricing on the pre-built systems and laptops and make sure that they are reasonably priced rather than trying to control the price of the individual GPUs on the market. And I think that they could maybe even fear looking like the bad guy, like their GPUs are too expensive, just like AMD and NVIDIA GPUs are right now. Although I do expect us to eventually get our hands on them as just individual GPUs that you can buy on the DIY market. I think that absolutely will happen. And Intel even has some sort of contest running right now, some kind of scavenger hunt on Twitter or something, where they're planning on giving away like 300 actual chips. Sorry, not chips, actual GPUs. Now, one more thing here. For all of this to work out, for these to be any good, Intel's going to need a good feature set and software stack to go with this. And this is where I think Intel absolutely has doubled down and put the money in. So one thing, this slide right here, is that Intel is absolutely targeting DLSS with their XeSS. They're not just like going halfway. This is not some kind of Fidelity FX super resolution that is, you know, just a spatial upscaler, although a good one. This is a DLSS competitor. They even poached the top designer of DLSS from NVIDIA to develop this. This is a big deal. And while we haven't really got it completely hands-on yet, Intel has been willing to show screenshots of this. And again, I will link this in my description, but they're showing an upscale of 1080p to 4K here. 250% magnification to help out with our YouTube compression and all that here. But if you look at the details in the background here, like on this crane and such, it does appear to actually be being reconstructed and giving a more detailed image than the native 1080p image did, along the lines of what we do generally see from DLSS. Now, whether it'll be truly on par with DLSS or better or worse, who knows? But there have been a lot of screenshots, and everything Intel showed of this really actually does look extremely promising. And honestly, I think this is the biggest thing for them to target. They are having ray tracing support, and we have no idea what to expect in terms of how good that ray tracing support is. But I really don't think ray tracing is the big thing right now. The main problem for AMD GPUs is their, as far as like competing on the market and people wanting to buy them. I see this all the time in my comments on my videos, is concerns about their drivers. And again, Intel has to have good driver support here right off the bat. And again, I think they're targeting that. They know that. I think they're putting a lot of effort there, but we still have to see what they deliver. But then DLSS, more people care about DLSS than they do about ray tracing. I see that all the time. And honestly, that's my personal opinion as well. Ray tracing, I think a few years down the line is going to be a big deal, but in the current generation of GPUs, not the end of the world for me. It's kind of neat in some games, I could take it or leave it, but DLSS can be an amazing performance boost, whether using ray tracing or not. And FSR is good, but this would be a real competitor. Now, I'm actually excited, just on the kind of the side note, from the AMD perspective, XeSS should run on any GPU. Now, Intel's explained that it will be specifically hardware accelerated by their GPUs, but it will also support GPUs like NVIDIA and AMD GPUs by using a fallback. I believe it's called DP4A. I'm not sure, but it's another machine learning type chip, the type instruction. I don't know the details on this kind of stuff, but the point is it will run on those. And modern AMD and NVIDIA GPUs do support those, but they're just not going to run it quite as efficiently, meaning that XeSS will give a bigger performance boost to Intel GPUs than it does to those other GPUs, but it will still work on them. And that is absolutely huge. I'm glad they did that, and honestly, they had to, because they're starting out with basically 0% market share. So for game developers to put this technology into their game only makes sense if a substantial number of their players might benefit from it. I'm actually hopeful that XeSS will supplant DLSS as far as being, if it ends up being as good, but has a broader support. If it does run well on other GPUs, I'd really like to see this turn into more of an open standard. In the same way that, NVIDIA had G-Sync, and they still do, but AMD's FreeSync technology was good enough and a lot more open and cheaper and easier to produce to where that kind of took over that market. I would love to see XeSS have that same effect on the market, because DLSS is fantastic technology, but NVIDIA wants to lock it down just to their GPUs. And anyway, so I'm really excited about this. So Intel is doubling down on a straight up machine learning competitor to DLSS, poached the top engineer. They are supporting ray tracing. They've said repeatedly that they're going to work really hard on the drivers and all of that. And they even have some productivity stuff that I don't go too much into. They have their own kind of ambient occlusion. There's all sorts of stuff going on here. I'm really excited about these. But in the end, do I think that Intel is going to save the GPU market right now? Well, more supply can only be good and can only help. But I don't think this is going to be like flipping a light switch, the GPU market is saved. I also don't think that, for those of you who might want to buy a GPU right now, but you're like, should I wait for Intel? Well, if you need a GPU right now, in computers, there's always something better down the line. And by the time these Intel GPUs actually launch, that's again where you're going to be like, but in a couple of months, we're going to start seeing the next GPUs coming from AMD and NVIDIA. And that, again, is possibly a big issue, but I actually don't think it's as big of an issue as you might think if the MSRP is right on these things. Again, MSRP. And here's why. If this GPU actually targets around a 3070 Ti performance. So usually what we'll see when there's a new generation of GPUs, like let's talk about NVIDIA's 4000 series, right? A 4060, a 4060 will likely have similar performance to the 3070 or the 3070 Ti, because that's just generally what we see happen. Usually when the next generation comes out, you can kind of just adjust the model numbers by one at one performance tier, and they roughly line up with that. Okay? That's usually what we see. It's not always perfect, but that's a good ballpark. In other words, I think that even though pretty soon we'll start seeing the new NVIDIA GPUs, they usually launch their top-end model first, and that'll be extremely expensive, so not a direct competitor here. Then they'll phase in the 70 class, which I think also won't quite be a direct competitor to this one, due to the performance. Then they'll later on, months later possibly, phase in their 60 class card, which actually would be, I think, more of a direct competitor to this if these performance targets are accurate. So again, I think there'll be months and months and months and months and months on the market before that actual direct performance competitor comes in from the 40 series, for one thing. And for another thing, the price is everything anyway, because if these are then equivalent to a mid-range GPU from the 4000 series, which is what most people are buying anyway, and if it's priced similar or hopefully even more aggressively than those, then great. So I actually don't think it's that big of a deal that they're coming in at this late point in the game. Wow, is this almost going on a 20-minute video? I better end this thing, guys. But what do you guys think in the comment section? I'm really excited for these. I think these are going to be good. I think Intel's doing everything right here. But I also, like I said, I don't think this is just going to suddenly flood the market with cheap GPUs, especially given that there's not going to be any kind of mining limiter on there. or any of that. I think it's going to be a slow trend back to more normal for the market. Although I don't think prices are ever going back to what they used to be. They'll get closer to it. I don't think they're ever going back to what they used to be, partially at least just due to inflation, right? There's been a lot of inflation lately. And so I don't think we'll ever see GPUs priced exactly where they used to be. All right, I'm really stopping now. Let me know what you think in the comments section and have an excellent day.